The first layer of forbidden Pokémon theory is the surface stories, the dark explanations that circulate through searches, list videos, and fan discussions. They're the accessible entry points, the familiar shadows that most players encounter when they begin exploring Pokemon's hidden side. Like the enduring belief that Ditto is a failed clone of Mew, a remnant of an experiment that never reached completion, a theory grounded in their identical weight, their matching transformability, their appearance near locations tied to Mewtwo's creation, and the fact that they share the same color in early generations. Or Cubone, whose story starts with the Pokédex's blunt admission that it wears the skull of its dead mother. Fans extend this grief into the idea that Cubone is the orphaned young of a Kangaskhan, a child forced into evolution by trauma, not by age. Then there is the silhouette pairing, Gengar as Clefable's ghost. Their outlines align almost perfectly, creating a mirrored pair. One living, one spectral. One light, one shadow. And of course, the Kanto war theory, which threads Lieutenant Surge's dialogue with the region's notable absence of adult men. Together, they imply that Red and Blue take place in the quiet aftermath of a conflict that the games never directly acknowledge. These surface stories are repeated because they're approachable and unsettling in equal measure. They form the invisible edge of Pokemon's darker undercurrents, but they are only the beginning. Beneath them lie details the game never spotlight, fragments left in the margins, and implications the series quietly embeds in official canon, and often tries to revise in later entries. To reach those examples, we move into Level 2, Buried Lore. Next, where the darkness stops being theory and becomes stated fact instead. Level 2 enters Buried Lore, the disturbing details written directly into the Pokédex. These are not theories, they are official lines that appear once, go unexpected, and are never addressed again. Take Yamask, who carries the mask of a human it once was, somehow remembering its past life clearly enough to mourn it. The game provides no explanation for how a person becomes this Pokémon, or why the transformation occurs at all. Or Phantump, formed when the spirit of a dead child possesses a rotting tree stump. The Dex confirms the event, but gives no cause of death, no origin, no further context, only that the process is real. Then you have Drifloon, known to take children by the hand and lead them astray. In Sinnoh, an NPC mentions a missing child after following one, a detail that is acknowledged once and is never expanded. Or Kadabra, whose entry states that a boy transformed into said Pokémon during a psychic disturbance. The record presents the incident as fact, without much needed explanation or follow-up. To these, add Lampent, which appears when someone is about to die, absorbing the departing soul. It moves through hospital corridors in silence, waiting for the moment a life ends. Or Frostlass, born from the spirit of a woman who died in the mountains, freezing travelers and keeping their bodies as displays. The games never elaborate on either. Individually, these entries seem like isolated horrors. Together, they form a pattern the franchise acknowledges once and then abandons. Brief records of death, possession, and transformation that receive no further explanation. Level 2 marks the darkness the games state directly, but deeper still, in Level 3, Phantom Records, the lore itself begins to fracture. Here, the shadows form not from what is written, but from what is missing. Level 3 consists of Phantom Records, the layer where Pokémon lore appears only in fragments. These are not clear Pokédex entries or explicit story events. They are traces of larger structures the games never fully commit to, leaving only partial records, corrupted references, or contradictory accounts. Consider Missing Number, an indexed entity that should not be encountered at all. Its position aligns with unused species slots, suggesting a Pokémon removed after the roster was set, leaving behind only a clue to something that once existed. Or Porygon, A Pokémon with no natural origin, no wild encounters, and no habitat anywhere in the world. It exists solely as artificial data, created in a lab the player never visits and by researchers the story never names. The evolution is documented, the creation is not. The Cinnabar Mansion journals describe experiments on a newly discovered Pokémon, but the entries cut off abruptly. They match parts of Mewtwo's origin, but not all of it, as if sections of the record were erased or never written. And across generations, Pokédex contradictions appear, origins stated clearly once, then altered or replaced in later games without acknowledgement. Taken together, these fragments reveal a record that is not merely incomplete, but interrupted. They hint at stories the games once approached, then diverted away from, leaving only mysterious outlines, dark corners where the Pokémon world appears to, selectively, lack information. The next level, Obscured Realities, marks the point where the record is not just fractured, but altered. These are the elements the franchise once presented openly, only to revise, soften, or withdraw in later versions. Level 4 theories are Obscured Realities, where we find information the Pokémon franchise once presented clearly, only to revise, soften, or withdraw in later versions. These are documented elements that existed openly before being reshaped into safer or simplified forms. The information is not missing. It has been adjusted. Take Gorochu, the fanged, horned, final evolution of Pikachu planned during the early games. Its removal rewrote the franchise's central evolutionary line, yet no in-universe trace or acknowledgement remains, as if the concept was never meant to be seen. The redactions continue. Prototype gold and silver sprites depict species far more predatory or monstrous than their final counterparts, revealing an early biological direction that was later toned down. Lavender Town undergoes progressive sanitization across remakes. Dialogue, ghost encounters, and references to death or trauma are softened or removed, diminishing the gravity of the original versions. Even localization changes reinforce the pattern. Text involving possession, human death, ritual behavior, or predation is repeatedly softened across regions and generations. The underlying event remains canon, but the explicit implications are stripped away. Game mechanics show signs of a revision too. Moves such as Curse and Nightmare once referenced self-harm, spiritual interference, or psychological damage. Later entries preserve the functionality, but erase or dilute the original intent. This depth of Pokémon theory reveals a world not only capable of darker ideas, but willing to revise them, leaving behind fragments of concepts the franchise seems determined to bury. As we continue ever deeper still, Level 5 examines what breaks when all surviving versions of the world are compared, where contradictions form a record that cannot be reconciled into a single, coherent theory. Level 5 of Forbidden Theory, Fractured Origins, reveals how Pokémon's official record breaks against itself. This is the layer where histories, biologies, and cosmologies collide, not because data is missing or censored, but because multiple canon statements cannot logically coexist. Consider how Pokémon creation myths contradict one another outright. Arceus is described as the origin of existence, yet Mew, Ultra Beasts, and Eternatus all occupy positions outside or before that timeline, and regional legends introduce independent cosmologies that cannot be merged into a single creation order. Biology fractures just as sharply. Nidorina and Nidoqueen cannot breed despite belonging to a family with a documented child stage. Wailmer evolves into Wailord without any coherent explanation for mass, volume, or scaling. Mantike requires Remoraid to evolve in regions where Remoraid do not appear, creating dependencies that break ecological consistency. Historical timelines diverge across generations. The Kalos War predates modern civilization by millennia, yet Hisui's accounts disrupt that placement. Sinnoh state that humans and Pokémon were once the same species, while other regions reject the idea entirely. And identical phenomena are assigned unrelated explanations depending on the game. Ultra wormholes, shadowification, possession events, and totem amplification function through similar rules, yet the narrative separates them into isolated systems. Convergent species overwrite earlier claims about exclusive origins, further eroding any unified timeline. Taken together, these contradictions create a world whose foundational texts cannot be reconciled. So what remains is a fractured history, multiple incompatible versions of the same reality, all presented as canon. But there's still further to go. Level 6 descends deeper still, into spaces never meant to be part of the world at all. Corrupted regions, discarded code, and habitats formed entirely from the system's exposed architecture. With level 6 expands the domain of Lost Zones, where Pokemon's world stops behaving like a self-contained environment and begins exposing the system beneath it. These are regions, encounters, and entities that exist only because the underlying architecture becomes visible where it should not. This is the game's forbidden scaffolding, servicing through failure. To start, there are maps and encounter tables that contain unreachable spaces, off-grid rooms, invalid tiles, missing textures, and looping geometry. These areas behave like construction frames left inside the final build, fragments of development that were never intended to function as locations. Examples appear as early as Generation 1, where the famous truck near the SS Anne sits on a harbor map tile the player never reaches in normal play. Unless, of course, they deliberately keep the ship from departing and return later with Surf. Glitch methods in Red and Blue can also push the player into Glitch City, a scrambled composite of tiles and collision data that looks more like exposed level geometry than a real place. Then there are glitch Pokemon that expose the forbidden structure even more clearly. Missing Number, M, and other overflow species emerge from invalid data references, capable of duplicating items, corrupting saves, or altering memory values. These glitched entities do not follow biological or ecological logic. They follow whatever the underlying data happens to be. Next come the broken game states. Safari Zone flags that persist outside the zone, duplicated trainers, invalid battle calls, and corrupted Hall of Fame entries. These occur when scripts reach into data they were never meant to access, merging NPCs, Pokemon, and system processes in ways no narrative can explain. And some of the clearest fractures appear in unused maps buried inside each game. Test rooms, placeholder corridors, and unfinished facilities remain sealed with the code, activating only through glitches or external tools. In early titles, this includes internal Safari Zone layouts that never appear in normal gameplay, and in Gold and Silver, an unused cave map left in the ROM despite having no role in the finished world. Lost Zones emerge where the world's logic fractures and its construction shows through, revealing spaces that exist only because the boundary between world and system collapses. When every such collapse is placed side by side, a deeper, more intentional pattern begins to appear. Level 7 examines the hidden design, the point where Pokemon's world suggests intention behind its gaps and contradictions. This layer does not focus on isolated anomalies. Instead, it considers the pattern that forms when every preceding layer is placed side by side. When you take canon that becomes frayed at its edges, the systems that reveal only partial logic, and records that repeatedly avoid complete explanations, what emerges is not random absence, but a controlled limitation on how much of the world can be known. Across regions and generations of Pokemon games, major events are described with precision until they reach a boundary beyond which the record becomes inconsistent or incomplete. Creation myths establish clear frameworks, yet the origins of key entities in these myths remain undefined at best. Or consider how legendary Pokemon hold absolute roles in one title, then conflicting or diminished roles in another. And even the mechanics that govern evolution, habitat, and behavior operate uniformly only up to a point. Then, they fracture into exceptions that the narrative does not clarify. This doesn't just happen once or twice. There's a consistent pattern. Concepts involving death, possession, predation, or ancient biology appear briefly before being softened or removed in later versions. Early designs implying alternate histories or divergent evolutionary paths are replaced without explanation. The result is a world that retains the outlines of larger systems but consistently withdraws the details needed to understand them. Glitches follow the same pattern. Data that reveals the system underneath is never treated as part of the world itself. It stays isolated, appearing only through errors or unintended conditions. The surface world seems complete, but the structure beneath it does not. The game only acknowledges that divide when something breaks. The hidden design, the deepest layer of forbidden Pokémon theory, is not a final answer, but a boundary, a limit defined not by what the world reveals, but by what it withholds.